Have you ever been in a place or state that you feel like you'll literally never be able to escape? Like you're gonna be in that place or state for the rest of your life, or even that somehow the entire universe is centered around that place or state. Like the entire universe has actually stopped functioning and you're gonna be stuck in whatever situation you're in until it starts functioning again, but at the same time, it feels like it's never going to actually do that because that would be like way too convenient. Well, that's how I felt very recently when I was bedriddenly sick with a wonderful illness simply known as mono. Insert comments about it being known as the kissing disease. Alright, moving on. At the worst points of my illness, I had a 102 fever, my tonsils were so swollen it felt like my throat was closing in on itself, and my sinuses were so congested I couldn't breathe through my nose had I put on a breathe-right strip and stuck 2 straws up it. You can all fill in the blanks about what all the other consequences of these symptoms were. I'm sure you'd all much rather use your imaginations rather than listen to me drone on about how I couldn't eat, breathe, swallow, or even stand for more than 5 minutes at a time. Or I don't know, can you even imagine that? But that's kind of my point, that that's not your situation right now, so are you truly able to imagine being in it? Because I kind of can't, and that was my life just a few weeks ago. I mean, I'm getting to the point where I'm beginning to wonder whether my inability to imagine realities other than the one I'm currently in is a problem or just some sort of defense mechanism. I can see it as a problem in that I can't see how someone can be truly empathetic if they can't genuinely imagine someone else's pain, but at the same time, isn't it a good thing if you can't intentionally inflict some sort of emotional pain upon yourself in a moment where you should just be focusing on being happy, because happiness is a gift rarely given that should be enjoyed whenever it can be had? But then wouldn't that same inability to imagine sadness in a state of smiles also disable you from imagining any kind of happiness when you're stuck in a state of sadness or depression? Because I've had both experiences, and I can certainly see how the positive of the one causes the negative of the other, but at the same time I see another problem here in that if my theory is true, these positives and negatives certainly don't and would never be able to balance each other out. Because not feeling sadness when you're happy in no way equates or justified not being able to imagine happiness when you're down. I mean, honestly, I don't think there's anything worse than that, but I'll come back to that idea in a moment. First, let's make sure you all get where I'm coming from before I move on to try to find some sort of solution to this problem I'm having. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying I can't objectively remember whether something that happened or something that I felt at one point in time was good or bad. For instance, going back to having mono, I remember all my symptoms and I have a vague sense of the physical agony I was in, but were I to get sick again, whatever misery I would be feeling in that moment would seem to me like the worst misery I'd ever felt, not because mono wasn't worse, but because that current misery would be my singular reality. Did that make sense? No? Well, as usual, just stick with me and there's a small chance that I'll start making sense. Okay, so going back to what I was saying, there's nothing worse than being down and not being able to imagine that it's going to end. And I know that some of you might not like that I'm using physical and emotional pain interchangeably, but frankly I think they're both equally dangerous and that they're both equally effective in making people feel miserable, emotional pain possibly more so. But to me, the only thing worse than being stuck in a state of pain and not being able to imagine coming out of it would be being stuck in a state of numbness and not being able to imagine ever feeling anything again. But how do we fix this problem? How do we talk ourselves into getting through our present situation into the next? How do we keep it in our minds that our realities are in a constant state of change? Well, I think that we have to keep it in our minds that everything on this earth, including our mental state, is temporary. Whether they end by changing or because you die, they will end. Okay, maybe that wasn't the best point to make. Like, maybe I should point out the fact that the only thing on this earth that will never change or end is death. So please don't think that I'm pointing that out as some sort of solution, because it's definitely not. And why is it not? Again, because everything you experience on this earth will change given enough time. But doesn't that kind of suck as a solution or explanation? I mean, I'm basically saying that time heals all wounds, and I know that if someone used that line on me while I was stuck in a state of misery or pain, I'd probably have to resist a very strong urge to punch them in the face. I mean, I guess it's true, but I also think it's a big whopping glob of BS because it implies that we have no control over our state of being, but I don't know, I guess sometimes we don't. It at least feels that way a lot of the time. Because I may hate it when people say that time heals all wounds, but it also bugs me when people dismissively insist that happiness is a choice, because as someone who struggles with depression, I can easily counter with the argument that whoever's saying that to someone who's unhappy is likely being a belittling idiot who underestimates the true power of despair. But I don't know, that one also seems to be true, at least some of the time. So where does that leave us? Because at this point I feel stuck in between the passive time heals all wounds and the active happiness is a choice option, so the solution has to be somewhere in the middle, right? I think what it comes down to is that we have to make a choice to imagine a different reality, and to accept that when we can't make change, time will do it for us, but that when we can, it's probably going to be really difficult. We have to accept that while change is natural, it's going to take either time or effort, or both. But what do you think? Is happiness just a choice that I'm too stubborn to make? Am I just too impatient to allow time to do the dirty work for me? Because honestly, at this point, I can't be certain of either. But what about you? Whether physical or emotional, what do you do when you're stuck in a state of misery? Feel free to leave your stories and answers in the comment section down below, and who knows, maybe we can use our collective brain power to figure this stuff out, because that's what the internet's for, right? I have a vague sense of the